Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
And minors. Listener discretion is advised. It was the summer of 1994, and 14-year-old Jane spent her break from school at a camp for talented young performers. There was a lot going on in her life back home, but for now, she was far away from all of that. She could just sing and hang out with other kids in the beauty of northern Michigan. While on a break from performing, Jane sat on a bench eating ice cream with her friends when a woman appeared, walking her dog. A man followed behind. The man and the woman struck up a conversation with Jane. They were best friends and lived an extraordinary life, jet-setting across the world. The man was wealthy, and he was generous too. He was a millionaire, and his money funded camp scholarships and helped build facilities. He liked swooping in to save the day. He was always looking for young people with talent who needed just a little bit of extra financial support to follow their dreams. It seemed like a stroke of good luck for Jane to be introduced to this philanthropist with lots of connections to powerful and famous people. And Jane discovered the man lived in Palm Beach, Florida, just like she did. Another seemingly happy coincidence. They exchanged phone numbers to stay in touch. What Jane didn't know then was that this meeting at a summer camp was the beginning of a nightmare that would last for years. Assistant U.S. Attorney Lara Pomerantz said in her opening statements in 2021, what she didn't know then was that this man and woman were predators. Jane wasn't their only victim. The man's name was Jeffrey Epstein. His female sidekick walking the dog was Ghislaine Maxwell. On today's episode, I'm taking a deeper look at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that took place last year in federal court in Manhattan. Jeffrey Epstein molested and raped young girls for decades without any serious punishment until an investigation by the Miami Herald cast his name in the national spotlight. Jeffrey was finally arrested and charged with federal crimes. But before he could be brought to justice, he was found hanging from a bedsheet in his jail cell in July 2019. Epstein's death left a gaping hole in the pursuit of justice for many of these women, Ghislaine's defense attorney said. And so Ghislaine stood alone at trial. The 60-year-old faced 6 federal counts of sex trafficking of minors and enticing a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. Throughout her trial, Jeffrey Epstein's name was the elephant in the room. It was inescapable. You couldn't hear the story of what happened to Jane and to the other victims without mentioning him by name. The defense argued that Ghislaine was the scapegoat because there was nobody else to point the finger at since Jeffrey was dead. Ever since Eve was tempting Adam with the apple, women have been blamed for the bad behavior of men, and women are often villainized and punished more than the men ever are. Ghislaine's attorney, Bobby Sternheim, said at trial, "The charges against Ghislaine Maxwell are for things that Jeffrey Epstein did, but she is not Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell is on trial because of her association with Jeffrey Epstein. She is a scapegoat for a man who behaved badly." But to the prosecution, Ghislaine was a criminal mastermind. She enabled Jeffrey Epstein. They said Ghislaine won the victims' hearts by taking them shopping and getting them to open up about their lives. At a time when they were lonely and vulnerable, nobody else was listening to them. Then Ghislaine brought up sex with them to normalize it. It was all a trap. She was going to hand them over to a predator, knowing full well Jeffrey would exploit them. The abuse went on from 1994 to 2004. Make no mistake, Maxwell was crucial to the whole scheme. Epstein could not have done this alone. Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe said, "A single middle-aged man who invites a teenage girl to visit his ranch, to come to his house, to fly to New York is creepy. That sets off alarm bells. But when that man is accompanied by a posh, smiling, respectable, age-appropriate woman, that's when everything seems to be legitimate. It lures them into a trap. Maxwell was the key to the whole operation." Which side was the jury going to believe? Was Ghislaine the innocent scapegoat, or the criminal mastermind guilty of committing federal crimes? This is Jillian, and in partnership with Law and Crime, you are listening to Court Junkie, episode 207. During opening statements on November 29, 2021, jurors heard about Jeffrey Epstein's extravagant means and his extraordinary lifestyle. He owned several properties, from an 8-story mansion in Manhattan to an apartment in Paris, a ranch in New Mexico, and a villa in Palm Beach, Florida. He even owned an entire private island in the United States Virgin Islands, the prosecution said. Jeffrey seemed to run his own mini economy. Staff worked for him at his different homes around the world. Pilots who worked for him full-time shuttled him around from place to place. He rode in private jets like the average person taking the commuter train. He had the money and the means to create an exceptional world, beautiful homes, beautiful surroundings, beautiful people, the defense said, comparing him to a 21st century James Bond because he was not only rich, but also mysterious. Jeffrey sometimes traveled with an entourage, yet he was also unattached. He never married. He didn't have any children. One of few close people in Jeffrey's life was Ghislaine Maxwell. The two had dated in the early 1990s, but when their romance fizzled out, they stayed best friends. They were rarely apart. She was involved in every detail of Epstein's life, the prosecutor told the jury. She was the lady of the house. Ghislaine was the one who kept order. She ran his properties and oversaw his employees. She had the power to hire and fire them. She was strict with them, telling them not to speak directly with Jeffrey or his visitors. Employees were to see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing, the prosecutor said. There was a culture of silence. That was done by design, the defendant's design, because behind closed doors, the defendant and Epstein were committing heinous crimes. Ghislaine and Jeffrey were partners in crime and had a playbook of how they groomed their victims, according to the prosecution. They targeted young girls who were from tough home lives, from poor families, raised by single parents. Then Ghislaine and Jeffrey listened. They learned about the girls' dreams for the future and what they wanted more than anything in life. They learned about how the girls felt alone and how their families were struggling during difficult times. And then Ghislaine and Jeffrey made the girls feel loved and special while wowing them with their wealth and famous connections. The girls believed Ghislaine and Jeffrey could make their wishes come true. Jeffrey paid for their school or promised to use his connections to get them into the modeling industry or to become an actress. Then came the trap. Ghislaine encouraged the girls to give Jeffrey a massage. She even gave one to Jeffrey herself to show them how to do it and make it seem like no big deal. In his luxurious homes, Jeffrey had a massage room stocked with massage oils. And in these massage rooms, he groped the girls and sexually assaulted them. The prosecutor said that sometimes Ghislaine became involved and touched the girls too. The defendant was essential to this scheme, the prosecutor said. She was able to provide a cover of respectability to Epstein that lured these girls and their families into a false sense of security. She was in on it from the start. The defendant and Epstein lured their victims with the promise of a brighter future, only to sexually exploit them and forever change their lives. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was dangerous. She was setting young girls up to be molested by a predator. The prosecution explained what was in it for Ghislaine. Her job was to provide Jeffrey with a never-ending revolving door of young girls. And in return, she stayed under Jeffrey's good graces, living off his riches too. Bank records show that Jeffrey paid Ghislaine $30 million between 1999 and 2007. It was payment for committing terrible crimes with Jeffrey Epstein, the prosecutor said. The sexual abuse went on for years. Jeffrey needed more and more girls to keep up with his sexual appetite. Ghislaine, the recruiter, asked girls to bring their friends over. She rewarded them with cash. During the trial, 4 victims took the stand for the prosecution, as would Jeffrey's pilots and his house staff. Evidence included the massage tables and nude photographs taken from Jeffrey's homes, and Jeffrey's plane log that confirmed he was traveling with underage girls. And according to the prosecution, at the summer camp where Jane met Jeffrey and Ghislaine, records confirmed Jane was there that day. The prosecution also had, as evidence, Ghislaine's little black book that kept track of dozens of girls' names. In her opening statements, the defense attorney, Bobby Sternheim, attacked the credibility of the 4 accusers. The defense's theme for the trial was memory, manipulation, and power. When it came to memory, she said so much time had passed, and as we all know, memories fade over time. Ghislaine's attorney told the jury that the 4 accusers will, quote, recount their memories of a quarter century ago, memories that have been corrupted by things that have happened throughout the years, manipulated by a narcissistic man and self-interested civil lawyers and a desire for a big jackpot of money. In this case, you will learn that not only have memories faded, but they have been contaminated by outside information, constant media reports, and other influences. She said the 4 accusers, quote, are going to tell 4 different stories. They're not going to be able to pinpoint dates. They're going to tell stories that have changed over time and grown over time. And Ghislaine has been inserted into these stories as they reframed their stories for a payday. There will be no eyewitnesses to their accounts. As for their theme of manipulation, she said, yes, Jeffrey Epstein manipulated the world around him and the people around him. He compartmentalized his life, showing only what he wanted to show to the people around him, including Ghislaine. And she said the 4 accusers were also manipulated by money. Jeffrey Epstein's estate had set up a fund to pay out victims. The fund didn't ask questions and didn't require proof, certainly beyond a reasonable doubt, she said. It made it very easy for these women to include Ghislaine Maxwell when it really always was about Epstein. According to the defense, the 4 accusers, who obtained civil attorneys to represent them, applied for the money from the victim fund and received millions of dollars in payments. His accusers have shaken the money tree, and millions of dollars have fallen their way, Sternheim said. She told the jury that Ghislaine was filling the empty chair in the courtroom where Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to be sitting. She is a lightning rod. She is a convenient stand-in for the man who... Objection, the prosecution interrupted. The defense had crossed a line by bringing up the prosecution's motivations, the judge said, siding with the prosecution. Sternheim continued. Who was Ghislaine Maxwell? She was well educated and had graduated from the prestigious Oxford University. She spoke several languages. She knew how to pilot a helicopter. She is being pegged as the rich girl, the socialite, Sternheim said, reminding jurors that being wealthy wasn't a crime. Ghislaine had met Jeffrey Epstein, who was attractive, charismatic, charming even. He was generous and rich. He drew people into him like a halo effect, and that included Ghislaine. They started out friends and then companions, but it evolved to an employer-employee relationship, she said. She had a time-consuming task of developing and administering his real estate portfolio, the multiple properties that each operated like small boutique hotels. His properties all over the world had to be cleaned, maintained, landscaped, stocked with food, and that food had to be cooked. You will hear that Ghislaine visited these properties with and without Epstein, and you will hear that Epstein spent time with other women and traveled without Ghislaine, Sternheim said. The government has pinned its entire case on the notion that Ghislaine enabled Epstein's bad behavior. The evidence will not support that. There will be no eyewitnesses, she said. What you will hear are stories that are based on words and words alone. The government is trying to stitch together stories of 4 different people, 4 different stories to support a pattern. The only pattern that you will see here is the success of those 4 people getting big money rewards from the Epstein Fund. The opening statement set the stage for 4 women, Jane, Kate, Carolyn, and Annie, to take the stand and relive some of the darkest moments of their lives. We spoke with New York attorney Zaki Tamir about the defense's strategy to attack the witnesses' memories and motivations.
It's a very, very hard defense to say, to attack the memory of a victim and to state that they're going after this for money requires a jury to now look at victims of a sex crime as liars and now look at the defendant as innocent or not guilty. I think that by using that defense, what they did was, in a way, is bunch themselves even more with Jeffrey Epstein.
Jane, which isn't her real name, took the stand on November 30th, 2021. There are no cameras allowed in federal court, and the judge asked a sketch artist not to draw her face precisely how she looked. Jane wanted her privacy to be protected. During the summer of 1994, 14-year-old Jane was at the prestigious Interlochen Arts Camp in northern Michigan. It was supposed to be a summer doing what she loved to do, music. Singing was a distraction from the heartbreak her family had been going through. Her father, a conductor and composer, had died from leukemia when she was 13. My father's employer had canceled his health insurance without him knowing, and he ended up in the hospital and died very suddenly, Jane testified. Basically, my family went into complete bankruptcy and lost everything, and we had to move out of our home. Jane's mom was broken. She was depressed, unable to grieve her husband's death as her children and herself were now in a precarious financial situation. Jane wasn't encouraged to talk about her feelings. She bottled everything in. Somehow, other family members scraped the money together to send the 7th grader to camp. One day, there was a break from playing music, and Jane sat on a bench with the other children, eating ice cream and hanging out, when a tall, thin woman walking a cute little Yorkie approached them. The kids asked if they could pet the dog. Then, after a few pats, the other children dispersed back to music class. Jane was there alone. A man then appeared. He was interested in what Jane had to say. What did she think about camp? Who were her favorite teachers? What classes were her least favorite? The man explained they were big benefactors of the camp, so it was helpful to get a student's opinion on it. The man and the woman asked where Jane was from. They were thousands of miles away in Michigan, so they both lit up when Jane said she lived in Palm Beach, Florida. What a coincidence, they said. We live there too. They asked who her parents were. They insisted they had heard of her father, who was a well-known musician, and they thought they knew her mother too. They asked her to write her mother's phone number down on the newspaper the man had been carrying. It's so nice to meet you. The man promised to call her mother. That was it, Jane testified. And just like that, she had a run-in with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell that was going to change her life. Jane's first impression was the man and the woman were married. She remembered how friendly and inquisitive they seemed. Without further interruption, Jane returned to her music lessons that summer, until camp ended and her life went back to normal. Her break from reality was over. Back in Florida, Jane, her mother, and 2 brothers stayed at a pool house in a family friend's backyard, because otherwise they were homeless. Jane slept with her mom because she didn't have a bedroom of her own. A few days after 8th grade started, the man and the woman from the random camp encounter reached out. Jane's mom said somebody from their office called and invited them to tea. A chauffeur picked up Jane and her mom and drove them to a massive, beautiful house, hidden behind a big white fence and gate. The house was decorated with artwork and sculptures and pictures with Jeffrey posing with famous people and presidents. There was a massive pool out back. The pastries, sandwiches, and tea were laid out on the back patio when Jane and her mom arrived. At Jeffrey's Florida palace, his obsession for underage girls was in the open, according to court testimony. There were lots of photographs of young girls, unclothed. I remember that they were shocking, another victim later testified. They were in almost every room. The tea was short, 30 minutes, just enough time for Jeffrey to win Jane and her mom over. He asked plenty of questions about how she did in school and about her interests. Jeffrey loved music, he explained to her mom, and he liked mentoring young artists. Jeffrey said how impressed he was with Jane and asked to hear her sing sometime. Jane saw him often after that. She testified she usually saw him once every week or two while she was aged 14 to 17. Ghislaine or Jeffrey's assistant would arrange the meetings, and a chauffeur would pick her up to take her to Jeffrey's. Jane always went alone. Her mom wasn't invited. What was your understanding at the time of what the relationship was between Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein? The prosecutor asked. I didn't really understand. They never really shared that information, Jane testified. I just assumed they were married. And then at a certain point, I thought maybe they're best friends. And then I thought, well, maybe she works for him because he would ask her to do things, make phone calls and things for him. So I guess I was just confused. Hanging out with Ghislaine and Jeffrey, Jane ate snacks in the kitchen, went to the movies, or swam in the pool. I remember maybe the first time I went to the poolside, and I walked out there, and there were at least 4 women and Ghislaine, all topless, and some of them were naked, Jane testified. I was just shocked because I hadn't seen that before. Ghislaine, who seemed a little bit odd and quirky but was nice and playful too, asked how Jane was doing at school and if she had a boyfriend. Jane said Ghislaine gave her relationship advice that was inappropriate and graphic, things a 14-year-old wouldn't understand. Almost every visit when Jane left, Jeffrey would put cash in her hand. No, it's okay, Jane would say, uncomfortable by the gift. Jeffrey insisted. This is for your mom. I know she's having a hard time and it's not a big deal, Jeffrey said. He bought her voice lessons, clothes, and school supplies. Jeffrey and Ghislaine also took her shopping to buy loafers, a cashmere sweater, button-on shirts, and at Victoria's Secret, white cotton briefs. She said they liked to name drop their famous friends like Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, journalist Mike Wallace, and Donald Trump. They would sort of name drop or sometimes put people on speakerphone whose voices I didn't know, and then say, oh, well, this was so-and-so and so-and-so, and would say that they were very well connected and affluent, Jane said. She felt intimidated by all of this. She was in over her head. Jane was getting to know Jeffrey Epstein, the mysterious and generous millionaire who seemingly wanted to help her and her family out. Jeffrey encouraged Jane to focus and figure out what she wanted to do. Do you want to be an opera singer? Be on Broadway? Find fame as an actress or a model? I know everybody. I know all the agents. I know all the photographers. I know the owner of Victoria's Secret, Jeffrey boasted. So I can make things happen, but you just have to be ready for it. And in the middle of that conversation, Jeffrey stopped talking. He took her hand and said, follow me. He took her outside in the backyard, past the pool to the pool house. He put her on a futon, pulled down his pants, and masturbated on her. I was frozen in fear. I had never seen a penis before, let alone anything like this, Jane testified. She was only 14 years old. She didn't tell anyone what happened. She said, I was terrified and felt gross, and I felt ashamed. The young girl, who had been given attention and money at a time her family was in dire straits, kept returning to the Epstein mansion. After the pool house incident, Jane was hanging out with Ghislaine and Jeffrey when it happened again, just like before. The conversation abruptly stopped and they asked her to follow, leading her up a winding staircase into Jeffrey's bedroom. They moved me over to the bed and took off their clothes and started fondling each other, kind of casually giggling about it. And I was just standing there, Jane testified. Jeffrey asked her to take her shirt off, and Jane said, there were hands everywhere. The sexual contact began happening every time Jane went to the mansion. Jeffrey and Ghislaine took her to the massage room located outside his bedroom. Acting like it was perfectly normal, Ghislaine explained how she should massage Jeffrey's body in a sexually charged way. Jane was confused. It was embarrassing. It felt anything but normal, no matter how Ghislaine made it seem. Sometimes other people were at the mansion. Suddenly, without much warning, Ghislaine and Jeffrey would summon the group to the massage room for group sex, Jane included. She testified that Ghislaine and Jeffrey took her on Jeffrey's private jet to New York City and Santa Fe when she was 14 to 16 years old. The sex abuse continued. It's hard to remember because I was abused pretty much every time that I would go over to his house, and it all started to seem the same after a while, whether it was just him or there were other women involved, or me and Jeffrey and Ghislaine. It all started to seem the same after a while, and you just become numb to it, Jane testified. Back home, Jane's mom knew whose company her daughter was keeping. My mom was so enamored with the idea that these wealthy, affluent people took an interest in me, Jane testified. She thought they seemed very generous, and they must think I'm special and that I should be grateful for the attention that I've received. Jane said she didn't feel like she could confide in her mom about the sexual abuse. She had grown up in a house where kids don't speak unless they were spoken to. She couldn't talk about her feelings, not even the pain of losing her dad. She once visited a guidance counselor after her dad died, but her mom was livid when she found out, screaming at her and slapping her for airing out the family's dirty laundry. If Jane revealed the truth about what Jeffrey was actually doing during their visits, she was convinced she would be in trouble. Meanwhile, Jane was landing jobs as a model. Her young career was progressing. At 17, she left Palm Beach and moved to New York City, where she attended the Professional Children's School. Jeffrey paid her tuition. He also paid for Jane's mother's apartment. In 1999, Jane landed a job on a TV show and moved to Los Angeles. I'm grateful to still be a working actor, she testified, proud of her 22-year career. Her relationship with Jeffrey finally came to an end in 2002 when she fell in love and got engaged. Her fiancé asked who was this person who always called and made Jane drop everything to take his calls. Oh, that's my godfather, Jane lied. Why not just call him back? Her fiancé asked. Jane said she found herself explaining her so-called godfather had a pretty abrasive personality. So don't call him back, her fiancé encouraged. And so Jane started ignoring Jeffrey. Jeffrey left angry voicemails, saying he was coming to visit and wanted to see her. You should be grateful for all I've done, he said. He reminded her he still paid for her mother's apartments. But Jane didn't call Jeffrey back. The prosecutor asked her how the sexual abuse during her teenage years affected her adult relationships. How do you navigate a healthy relationship with a broken compass? Jane asked. I didn't understand what real love is supposed to look like. It ruined my self-esteem, my self-worth. I don't know how men were supposed to treat me, and how I was supposed to reciprocate any of that. It led me to not trust people and probably make bad decisions in future boyfriends. Jane and her fiancé eventually broke up. She dated someone else and finally confided in him that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had sexually abused her. Jeffrey had just been arrested and his face was everywhere, and it would make me very emotional, and my boyfriend at the time would notice that and kind of wonder, she testified. That's when she broke down and told him the truth. In 2019, the FBI interviewed her. In 2020, she sued Ghislaine and Jeffrey's estate in civil court. Jeffrey's estate paid her $5 million, although nearly half of that money went to her lawyer fees and court costs. She dismissed her lawsuit against Ghislaine after she was awarded the money from the estate. Just like she was testifying in federal court, she had used a pseudonym in civil court filings to protect her identity. "Why is it important to you to remain anonymous?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I've always just wanted to put this past me. I moved on with my life," she said. "I'm proud that I have my own career, my own husband, my own children, and I work in the entertainment industry. And victim shaming is still very present to this day. I was always afraid it was going to affect my career if somebody looks at me and that's all they see, and that they won't hire me based on that. So I didn't really want any part of it. I just wanted it to go away." Before the second accuser took the stand, the judge told the jury that she was over the age to consent to sex at the time. The prosecution was not allowed to ask her about the details of her sexual contact with Jeffrey Epstein. "I instruct you that this witness is not a victim of the crimes charged in the indictment. To the extent you conclude her testimony is relevant to the issues before you, you may consider it," the judge told the jury. Kate, which again isn't her real name, told a story that echoed what Jane had said on the stand days earlier. The story of a lost girl, meeting Ghislaine and feeling a spark, another tea invitation, and then being exploited by Jeffrey while Ghislaine was complicit, knowing what was happening behind the closed doors. Kate lived on the other side of the world as Jane. In the 1990s, she was 17 years old and lived with her mom in London, England. At 17, Kate had a 35-year-old boyfriend. She was alone a lot. She had just switched schools and missed all her friends back in France. Her mother was often ill with terrible migraines. Her older boyfriend took her to Paris on a trip and introduced her to Ghislaine. Kate was impressed by Ghislaine, this stranger in her 30s who seemed sophisticated and elegant. "We spoke about where I lived. We spoke about the man that I was dating. She was asking me things about myself," Kate testified. She gave Ghislaine her phone number. A few weeks later, Ghislaine called and invited her over for tea at her townhouse. Kate said she was just excited to have a cool, older new friend. "She seemed to be everything that I wanted to be," Kate testified. "I had a really lovely time, and I felt really special." Kate shared that she had been offered a spot at Oxford University to study law, although her real passion was music. Ghislaine told me lots of amazing things about her boyfriend, and she said that he was a philanthropist and that he liked to help young people, and that at some point it would be really wonderful for me to get to meet him, and that we shared so many things in common, Kate testified. She said that he was going to love me and that I was exactly the kind of person he would like to help. She seemed very genuinely excited about it, and I was excited too. Kate's testimony grew more reminiscent to Jane's testimony. Her meeting Jeffrey, the massages, the sexual encounters. "Have a good time," Ghislaine said as she closed the door to the massage room, leaving Kate alone with a naked Jeffrey Epstein. Afterward, Ghislaine asked her, "Did you have fun? You're such a good girl, and I'm so happy you were able to come. This is really great, and he obviously likes you a lot." Within a few weeks, Ghislaine asked Kate if she knew anyone else who could come over and give Jeffrey oral sex. Ghislaine said, "You know what he likes. Cute, young, pretty, like you." Jeffrey wanted sex 3 times a day. The prosecutor asked Kate what Ghislaine's demeanor was like when she talked like this to Kate. I would say that it was almost like a schoolgirl, Kate testified, and I almost felt like she was younger, like talking like she was younger than me, which was odd. And everything was fun and everything was silly and everything was just very exciting. And just everything seemed to be like a fun, silly joke. Kate said she thought Ghislaine and Jeffrey were dating, but later on realized Ghislaine worked for Jeffrey. I understood that her job was to take care of Jeffrey's needs, Kate testified. Kate visited Jeffrey in Florida. Ghislaine laid out a provocative schoolgirl's outfit and instructed her to wear it while she served Jeffrey tea. Kate stayed in touch with Jeffrey through her young adult years, but she stopped seeing him in her mid-20s. I didn't want to admit what had happened to me, and I felt that by ceasing communication, I would have to acknowledge the events that had taken place, and I would have to say something. I was also fearful of disengaging because I had witnessed how connected they both were, and I was fearful, she told the jury. She bottled her emotions inside and relied on substances to help her feel better, but it was getting out of control. She testified that in her 20s, she became addicted to alcohol, cocaine, and sleeping pills. She conquered her addictions in 2003 and got sober. She asked to testify under a pseudonym because she was a mother. She didn't want her child to be associated with anything that was brought up in court. The prosecutor also asked, to get it on the record before the defense could bring it up, if Kate ever received money from Jeffrey's estate. She said she had been paid $3.25 million, although she didn't keep it all. Some of it went to her attorneys. Under cross, Ghislaine's defense attorney tried to present Kate as someone who was fame-seeking, someone whose drug abuse ruined her memory, and someone who was cooperating with the government to get something out of it. Kate, who was British, wanted her visa renewed. You've spoken to a number of tabloids and magazines throughout the year, haven't you? The defense attorney asked. Yes, Kate testified. You've been featured in a number of magazines and news articles, haven't you? Yes. You've spoken about your life on a number of occasions, haven't you? Yes. And your picture has been in a number of magazines? Yes. During the period of time that you testified meeting Ghislaine and Epstein, you were an international model? The defense attorney asked. I was a model, Kate testified. You have also considered yourself to be fiercely ambitious, correct? At times. In fact, back in around 2004 when you were interviewed, you said that for as long as you could remember, you were ambitious. Do you remember that? Ghislaine's attorney asked. And you also said that you spent 90% of your time thinking about the next move. But the other 10% was that you were thinking about your dog, wasn't it? The defense went on. You're aware that your attorney wrote a book about your case and the cases of others while he has been representing you, correct? Yes, Kate replied. Fair to say that using and abusing those substances over a 10-year period has had an impact on your memory, correct? The attorney asked. It has not had an impact on the memories that I have always had, Kate said. In fact, she said the memories she testified to were when she was sober. She said she was always required to be sober around Ghislaine and Jeffrey. Carolyn was the third accuser. She recounted how she was a troubled child growing up in an unstable home in Florida. Her mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and her grandfather had molested her. Carolyn testified that she was free to do whatever she wanted. There was no discipline in her life. So she dropped out of middle school, dated an older boy and lied about her age to him, and smoked pot. She met Jeffrey Epstein through Virginia Roberts, who was a friend of her boyfriend's. If you've paid attention to the Jeffrey Epstein case, the name Virginia Roberts might ring a bell. She's the woman who has accused Prince Andrew of raping her as a girl. Carolyn said Virginia asked if she wanted to make money. She was 14 at the time. All Virginia told her was that it involved going to Palm Beach Island and meeting her rich friend and giving him a massage. Carolyn said yes. She was eager to get some money. When the two girls arrived at the mansion, Ghislaine was the one who greeted them. Carolyn called her Maxwell because she couldn't pronounce her first name. Virginia had taken off her clothes and she asked me if I would be comfortable taking off mine, Carolyn testified, and I told her I would like to keep my bra and underwear on. The girls massaged Jeffrey, and then Virginia had sex with him while Carolyn, still in the room, sat on a couch. Carolyn was paid $300 in cash from money hidden in the sink in the bathroom. The money was paid out in $100 bills. I was young and $300 was a lot of money to me, Carolyn testified. Ghislaine asked for Carolyn's phone number as she left. That was the start. Carolyn testified that she went back to the house about 100 times to give massages between the ages of 14 and 18. Something sexual happened every single time, she testified. Since she was too young to drive for most of those visits, she took a cab, or her boyfriend dropped her off, or Jeffrey sent a driver to get her. Acting like a secretary, Ghislaine called and scheduled the appointments during the first year or two. Ghislaine was in an office off the kitchen when it was time for Jeffrey's massage. I was upstairs setting up the massage table, and at that point, I was kind of comfortable because I had been there so many times, that at that point I was getting fully nude, Carolyn testified, and Ghislaine came in and felt my boobs and my hips and my buttocks, and said that I had a great body for Mr. Epstein and his friends. Carolyn said she used the money to buy drugs. What drugs were you using? The prosecutor asked. Marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, anything that could block out for me to go to the appointment, Carolyn testified. Carolyn opened up to Ghislaine and Jeffrey about the traumas she had experienced in her young life. She told them she wanted to be a massage therapist someday, as a career. They showered her with gifts, like lingerie, a massage book for dummies to help advance her career, and Incubus concert tickets. Carolyn began inviting her teenaged friends to join her at Jeffrey's to make some cash, just like Virginia had done for her. Jeffrey always masturbated. He always touched Carolyn's body. A few times he had sex with her, but he stopped when Carolyn said she wasn't comfortable. Even after Carolyn had had a baby with her boyfriend, she still went back to Jeffrey's because she needed the money to buy baby supplies. He asked me if I had any younger friends, and I said no. And that's when I realized I was too old, Carolyn testified. How old were you? The prosecutor asked. 18, Carolyn said. Her life was in shambles by then. She was addicted to drugs. She had a criminal record, arrested for possession of cocaine in 2011 and for possession of stolen property in 2013. To make money, she became an escort and a stripper. She had more children. She wasn't in a healthy place. There was a voice playing in her head that she tried to ignore. The voice said her daughters were going to be kidnapped and sex trafficked and taken from her. I feel like people are out to get my children, Carolyn said, although she said she knew the voices were not real and that her children were safe with her. In 2007, Carolyn spoke with the FBI. Later on, she also retained a lawyer and sued Jeffrey Epstein because of all the damage, emotional damage he did to me, she said. Carolyn admitted that she had lied in an earlier court deposition when she said she hadn't slept with her clients when she worked as an escort. She said she was too embarrassed to admit the truth. For her lawsuit against Jeffrey, she received $250,000, and she also received between $1 million and $3 million, she wasn't sure exactly how much, from Jeffrey's estate. Annie Farmer was the only accuser to use her full name. She was 42 years old. She had completed her PhD and went on to have a career as a psychologist. Annie testified that she was only 16 years old the first time she gave Jeffrey Epstein a massage. She lived in Arizona back then. Her parents were divorced and money was tight. Annie's father didn't help out much, and her mother worked as a sales representative, trying to support her children on her own. Ghislaine and Jeffrey entered Annie's life through her older sister, Maria. Maria was a painter and worked for Jeffrey. Maria lived in New York, so one day, Jeffrey bought Annie a plane ticket to visit her in 1995. He treated the sisters to Phantom of the Opera tickets on Broadway. He invited them to his home and served them champagne, and Annie admired how spacious his home was. He even had a library. He seemed interested in what Annie wanted to study after high school. He encouraged her to travel because that would look good on her college application. Annie said she was thrilled. She had been looking forward to this moment, to meeting Jeffrey, who was her ticket to getting her education paid for when her family otherwise could hardly afford it. But her trip started taking a strange turn. She said she, Maria, and Jeffrey went to the movies to see a film called 5 Monkeys. During the movie, Jeffrey secretly grabbed Annie's hand and rubbed her shoes and her leg. The romantic gestures from a much older man made her sick to her stomach and anxious. Meanwhile, Maria, her protective sibling, was oblivious to his moves in the darkened movie theater. Annie was scared to tell her what happened since Maria worked for him. And so Annie stayed silent, but she wrote about it in her journal. Quote, "Oh, well, I decided it was no big deal. It just made me mad because he's being so amazing, paying for a summer program for me and helping me with college. He's so nice and so generous with everyone. I just didn't want to have any weird feelings about it. I couldn't say anything to Maria about it because she worships him and it would just create problems. I couldn't tell anyone else because it's not a big deal and I didn't want to portray him in a bad light. I really don't think it's a big deal. I think he's just a relaxed guy and likes to flirt or was being fatherly or something. I know this sounds like me trying to justify him doing something weird, but it isn't." In 1996, 16-year-old Annie traveled to New Mexico to Jeffrey's ranch. She flew alone. After that movie theater incident, she was uncomfortable to be on her own with Jeffrey, but she felt better knowing Ghislaine, his girlfriend, would be there too. "I believed that they were romantic partners. They were very intimate with each other in terms of touching each other and the way that they spoke with each other and interacted. It was what I had seen from couples." But she said hanging out with them alone at the ranch was a mixed bag. "It seemed unusual in a way, being that I was a teenager, to be spending this time with them," she testified. "But there's a way in which it sort of made me feel special that they would want to spend this time with me." They went on a tour of the ranch and went shopping. They bought Annie a pair of cowboy boots. They went to a rated R movie, Primal Fear, starring Edward Norton. It was very similar to the first time that I went to the movies with Epstein, and that he right away began to hold my hand and caress it, and rub on my foot and on my arm, she said. He didn't seem to be concerned about hiding these behaviors. He was very blatant in doing it throughout the film. After the movie, in Jeffrey's den, she said Ghislaine wanted to show her how to rub his feet. "I watched what she was doing, and she instructed me, you pull back his big toe, rub this part of his foot, and so I did what she told me. He seemed, to be enjoying it. He sort of made like groaning noises, like it felt good to him. I felt very uncomfortable. I did not want to be touching his feet. And also, just the whole situation I wanted to stop, and I was hoping it would be over quickly." But it wasn't over quickly. The uncomfortable awkwardness was escalating. She said Ghislaine wanted to give Annie a massage. She set up the massage table in the room Annie was staying in and told her to undress. "And then she, started rubbing my body and rubbing my back and my legs," Annie testified. "And while she's doing this, she's just making small talk. And then at some point in the massage, she had me roll over so I was laying on my back. She pulled the sheet down and exposed my breasts and started rubbing on my chest." Annie said she was frozen. She was isolated in the middle of the desert. She told herself, "Just get through this weekend." The other memory that stands out the most is being in bed in the morning and suddenly Epstein kind of opening my door and sort of bounding into the room in this sort of playful way and saying that he wanted to cuddle, she said. "And so he climbed into bed with me and kind of laid behind me and reached his arms around me, and he pressed his body into me. So I just made the excuse and got out of bed and went into the bathroom and shut the door. And I don't remember how long I was in there, I just remember thinking, like, I wanted to be in there long enough that hopefully this situation would be over. When Annie flew home, she wanted to forget the weekend ever happened. She didn't write about it in her journal. She shoved the boots in the back of her closet. She said years later, she felt empowered enough to reclaim the boots and wear them again. By then, she had already told her story to the FBI in late 2006 or early 2007. In the fall of 2019, she sued Ghislaine and Jeffrey. She applied and received $1.5 million from the Epstein Victim Compensation Fund. Her attorneys didn't receive any of that money because they were working pro bono. Annie publicly told her story in the media. Even though Jeffrey Epstein was said to have abused hundreds of young girls over the years, the prosecution only called 4 women to testify against Ghislaine. It was a streamlined case. The trial lasted about a month, and with only 4 alleged victims testifying, there wasn't much opportunity for the defense to cross-examine a giant list of accusers to try to break apart the government's case.
They selected the victims that they knew would present the best and the strongest evidence against her. It was, a relatively short trial as far as, compared to what it was expected to be. But I think that the witnesses, it's very, very hard to attack their credibility other than, generalizing as to what their motivation was for coming forward. And at the end of the day, a lot of, defense attorneys are stuck with this trying to discredit a witness because of their intentions. But in reality, it's not, there's nothing illegal about being motivated to come forward for money if what you're saying is true. It was an easy one for the prosecution. They were very smart to bring only 4 witnesses. They streamlined this case. They ran right through it. They did it very, very effective prosecution.
In their closing arguments, the prosecutor told the jury Ghislaine Maxwell was dangerous. She ran the same playbook over and over again as she exploited young girls. The similarities between what happened to Jane and Annie and Carolyn and Kate are incredibly powerful evidence of the defendant's guilt. The reason why the defense repeatedly attacked the 4 women and called them liars or said they had faulty memories, the prosecutor said the defense knew how powerful the 4 women's testimony was too. The 4 accusers were devastating evidence of Maxwell's guilt, they said. It was time to hold Ghislaine accountable. Then the defense presented their closing arguments, attacking the details, big and small, from what the 4 women said on the stand. For instance, Annie said she saw the movie 5 Monkeys when Jeffrey first touched her hand in the theater in New York. But no such film existed. It's called 12 Monkeys, the defense said. Or Jane originally told authorities she saw Jeffrey walk by that fateful day at summer camp. On the stand, Jane said Ghislaine approached her first with the Yorkie. Every last one of the government's interviews with these accusers, and there were dozens you heard, were not recorded. There's no transcript. There's no record of the exact questions that were asked or who asked what questions or whether the lawyers suggested that maybe their clients had something more to add, Ghislaine's defense attorney Laura Menninger said. The accusers made it seem like Ghislaine was at the center of all this, that she's the right-hand woman. She's Cruella de Vil and the Lady Wears Prada all wrapped into one. This is a manipulation of the truth as old as Hollywood, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen, and don't be fooled by it, Menninger said. With the money on the line, the accuser's goal of holding someone accountable for Jeffrey Epstein, who was dead at the forefront, and the tape recorders turned off, the accuser's memories started to shift. She asked where the missing evidence was and the other witnesses. Where was the schoolgirl outfit Katie had testified about? Why didn't Virginia Roberts testify and take the stand to corroborate Carolyn's testimony? So every witness you didn't hear from, every piece of document that you didn't see, every piece of evidence that you didn't see, You can take that into account and decide whether the government has met their awesome burden, Menninger said. Ghislaine Maxwell is an innocent woman, wrongfully accused of crimes she did not commit. The jury deliberated for about 40 hours. They sided with the prosecution's version of Ghislaine, the criminal mastermind. She was guilty on 5 out of the 6 counts. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams of the Southern District of New York praised the 4 women for taking the stand.
The road to justice has been far too long, but today, justice has been done. I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom. Their courage and willingness to face their abuser made today's result and this case possible.
The jury ruled Ghislaine was not guilty of enticement of an individual under the age of 17 to travel with intent to engage in illegal sexual activity. This was the charge involving Jane. Attorney Zaki Tamir told us that he wished he could interview the jury to find out what went on in the room during deliberations over that charge. He wondered if Ghislaine's defense would try and use that to her advantage at her sentencing. But another cloud hung over the jury's verdict. At least one juror had been a victim of sexual abuse and brought up what happened to him as a child while the jury were in the midst of deliberations. The juror hadn't disclosed his abuse before, when all of the potential jurors were asked in a confidential questionnaire whether they or any relatives or friends had been the victim of sexual abuse or harassment during the jury selection process. Ghislaine's defense team pounced. They asked for a mistrial. A judge denied their request in April 2022. The juror had read through the questionnaire quickly and missed the sexual abuse question. It was an honest mistake, the judge ruled. In June 2022, Ghislaine was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She was also sentenced to 5 years of supervised release and ordered to pay a $750,000 fine. She will reportedly serve out her sentence in a low-security prison in Florida. She is appealing the verdict. And that's all for this episode. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Let me know by joining the conversation on Instagram @CourtJunkie, by tweeting me @CourtJunkiePod, or by emailing me at podcast@CourtJunkie.com. If you'd like to hear these episodes without the ads or hear additional Court Junkie bonus content, you can check out my Patreon options by going to CourtJunkie.com/support. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the Court Junkie team's new podcast, Civil, about fascinating civil trials, please do so. We are getting ready to launch within the next couple weeks. You can do a search for Civil and Court Junkie on your podcast listening app, or you can click on the link in the show notes. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.